Welcome back to End Times Prophecy News for the 7 a.m. report, April 18th. Analysis: China needs to deal with North Korea more than the U.S. does. Very true. A recent analysis has detailed why China has much more to lose from the North Korea situation than America does. They're closer. But not only that, biggest one is South Korea. And here's a picture of it, sort of from a globe site. You got China up here, got North Korea. They're not showing it, I guess, because it's the way the picture is, but you got North Korea over here, Pyongyang. Shouldn't China, not the United States, be handling the North Korea problem? From Free Market Shooter. So seeing the Chinese proximity to North Korea and the nation's belligerence, why hasn't the Chinese government handled the problem of constant North Korean nuclear belligerence? As of Two Minds again explained, you have to understand why North Korea exists in the first place. As a buffer between South Korea and a potential U.S.-led land invasion into China and China itself. To understand the China-North Korea client-state relationship, we have to start with the 1950s era Cold War and the hot war in Korea, 1950 to 53. Threatened by the Cold War American presence in South Korea, China viewed North Korea as an essential buffer against invasion from the South. When Allied Western forces occupied virtually all of the North Korea in the Korean War, China's army crossed the Yalu River to force a return to the pre-war border between North and South Korea. China's supreme leader, Chairman Mao Zedong, took the threat of land invasion so seriously that he ordered, at enormous expense, the relocation of critical industrial plants from coastal areas into the hinterlands, the better to distance themselves from invasion. China has effectively subsidized and supported the North Korean state for the past 70 years as a buffer against a land invasion from South Korea. China supplies North Korea with fossil fuels and other essentials and protects it diplomatically. So the U.S. is responsible for South Korea and China is responsible for North Korea. Both are important strategic responsibilities, but it is far more important to China for obvious reasons. But consider the other benefits, drawbacks of both nations, and ask yourself, beyond the buffer rationale, is there any good reason to support North Korea? The difference between North Korea and South Korea is mostly political. Stalinist North Korea has starved its people for decades to support a vast war machine and kept them ignorant of the broader world. South Korea's economy is larger by some measures than the economies of nations such as Spain, Australia, Mexico, and Russia. South Korea is not just a formidable economic power. It fields a powerful military and has global soft power via its media and investment reach. It also has a substantial trade with China. South Korea is a powerhouse. North Korea is a rogue state that has starved millions of its citizens to death and threatens to spark a nuclear war that could impact China very negatively, even if China avoids military conflict. Which state would you rather be responsible for protecting? Which one is an asset and which one is costly, risky liability? The answer is obvious to all. So what has changed recently? The nuclear saber rattling has been going on since North Korea has been in existence. But more recently, the only thing that has changed its leadership is Kim Jong-il died and replaced by his son, Kim Jong-un, and President Obama left office and was replaced by President Trump. Kim Jong-il was content to make threats, receive relief from sanctions and or food relief, and be on his way. Obama was fine to conduct a few mock bombing runs and military exercises, but generally shied away from conflict. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un has behaved in a far more unstable manner than his father and his predecessor, executing senior officials with the unnecessary firepower of an anti-aircraft gun simply for rubbing him the wrong way. North Korea executed 5 senior security officials for making false reports that enraged leader Kim Jong-un, South Korea's Yonhap news agency reported Monday. The 5 were killed with anti-aircraft guns, the National Intelligence Service said in a private briefing to lawmakers. According to the news agency, it wasn't immediately clear what the false reports were, but they appeared to be unrelated to the assassination of Kim Jong-nam, the estranged half-brother of Kim Jong-un 2 weeks ago. And when it comes to the difference between Presidents Obama and Trump, one could clearly go on at length, but sending 3 carrier strike groups, the same number used in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 to strike Iraq, is a much bigger statement than anything the Obama administration ever made. And breaking news, an expert has just claimed it was all staged. Now, I don't agree with this at all. And let me tell you right away. Well, first, let's open it up. A leading MIT weapons expert, MIT weapons expert, is claiming the Syrian chemical attack was staged. Does a college millennial know more than the United States government? Is all of our Trump cabinet rogue now? Well, it'd have to be if you believe him. ibtimes.co.uk reports that a leading weapons academic has claimed that the Khan Shaykhun nerve agent attack in Syria was staged, raising questions about who was responsible. Wouldn't this be the best way to get you to go rogue on your government and think they're all against you? Wouldn't this be the best way to get the leftists to rise up and get radical and get a lot of Trump supporters to join them? Oh, yeah. Theodore Postel, a professor, there you go. Professor, look how many professors have gone against Trump. A professor emeritus at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology issued a series of 3 reports in response to the White House's findings that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad perpetrated the attack on April 4th. He concluded that the U.S. government's report does not provide any concrete evidence that Assad was responsible, adding it was more likely that the attack was perpetrated by players on the ground. We'll see that the U.S. government has already given us much proof. Let's see, are you going to debunk it all? Or any of it? Postel said, I have reviewed the White House's documents carefully, and I believe it can be shown without doubt that the document does not provide any evidence whatsoever that the U.S. government has concrete knowledge that the government of Syria was the source of the chemical attack in Khan Shaykhun, Syria, at roughly 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. on April 4th. In fact, a main piece of evidence that is cited in the document point to an attack that was executed by individuals on the ground, not from an aircraft, on the morning of the April 4th. This conclusion, like how? Show us how. This conclusion is based on an assumption made by the White House I would say that you're the one making the assumptions, when it cited the source of the sarin release and the photographs of that source. My own assessment is that the source was very likely tampered with or staged, so no serious conclusion could be made from the photographs cited by the White House. The image Postel refers to is that of a crater containing a shell inside which is said to have contained the sarin gas. His analysis of the shell suggests that it could not have been dropped from an airplane, as the damage of the casing is inconsistent from an aerial explosion. Instead, Postel said it was more likely that an explosion charge was laid upon the shell containing sarin before being detonated. Former president indicted and could go to jail for life. South Korean Park Geun-hye has been indicted and could end up in jail for life. South Korean prosecutors on Monday indicted ex-President Park Geun-hye on bribery, extortion, abuse of power, and other high-profile corruption charges that could potentially send her to jail for life. It is the latest in a series of humiliations for Park, who was driven from office by massive and peaceful popular protests. Park was impeached in December, officially stripped of power in March, and has been in a detention facility near Seoul since being arrested last month on allegations that she extorted from businesses, took bribes, and committed other wrongdoings, all in collaboration with a longtime confidant. Prosecutors also indicted Shin Dong-bin, the chairman of Lot, South Korea's fifth largest business conglomerate, on a charge of offering a bribe of 7 billion won, or $6 million US dollars, to Park and her friend Choi Soon-sil in exchange for a lucrative government license to open a new duty-free shop. Park will remain jailed and be escorted from the detention center to a Seoul court for a trial. That is to start in coming weeks and could take as long as 6 months. It is still unclear if the trial will start before a May 9th special election that will determine her successor. Park, 65, was elected South Korea's first female president in late 2012. The country will now watch as she is forced to stand in court while handcuffed, bound with rope, and possibly dressed in prison garb. If convicted, her bribery charge carries the biggest punishment, ranging from 10 years in prison to life.
A brand new foreign policy challenge for President Trump. America's only ally on the Korean Peninsula removed from the presidency overnight.
The ruling in South Korea triggered deadly chaos on the streets of Seoul, where supporters and critics faced off in dueling rallies, both sides clashing with riot police.
At least 2 people have died in those skirmishes, and ABC's Jui Cho is in Seoul, South Korea, with the latest.
Candice and Lindsay, it was a unanimous vote by the 8-judge panel, a historic moment for South Korea. Park has been the first woman president and now the first to be impeached.
Many here saying she deserves the verdict.
She didn't fulfill her responsibility as a president.
The crowd cheering in joy, some crying, others even dancing. Park and her lifelong friend is accused of abusing power and receiving bribes from businesses, including Samsung. Now, as a civilian, Ms. Park faces grueling investigation. Protesters here already calling for her to be sent to jail. South Korea chooses the next president within 60 days who will face challenges of North Korean threat and Chinese pressure on South Korea to give up a new anti-missile defense system provided by the U.S. The leading candidate is the liberal opposition leader Moon Jae-in, who tends to lean towards China and North Korea. If elected, he has pledged to review the anti-missile defense system, hinting the future of U.S.-South Korea relations is heading towards a rocky road. Joo-hee Cho, ABC News, Seoul, South Korea.
Well, it sounds like Park Geun-hye had too many meetings and got too friendly with Hildebeest and ended up being just a chip off the old block, but got busted. Anyway, I have no idea what happened to Park Geun-hye, but thank you for listening and hope to see you at 8 o'clock. God bless you.
If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin